Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Rachel Stern, Director and CEO of the Fritz Ascher Society for Persecuted, Ostracized, and Banned Art based in New York. We research, discuss, publish, and exhibit artists whose life and work were affected by the German Nazi regime between 1933 and 1945. With this work, we commemorate their lives and achievements. Today's event is all about commemoration. In honor of tomorrow's Holocaust Remembrance Day, we are kicking off a 48-hour data entry challenge in partnership with the Arolsen Archives and Yad Vashem. I have the pleasure to welcome Elizabeth Berkowitz, our former Digital Interpretation Manager, who will tell you more about Every Name Counts and the Fritz Ascher Society, and Katharina Menschick from the Arolsen Archives in Germany, who will introduce you to the Arolsen Archives and the current project. We'll learn how to enter data and we'll get to ask questions. Elizabeth Berkowitz is an art historian specializing in modern art historiography, pre-World War II European painting, and digital humanities strategies. Her writings have appeared in both popular and academic publications, and she has extensive experience as an educator and program developer for universities and cultural organizations. Elizabeth was previously the Fritz Ascher Society's Digital Interpretation Manager and is currently the Executive Director of the American Trust for the British Library. Katharina Menschick studied international development and political science in Vienna, Austria, and received an MA in Liberal Studies from the City University of New York Graduate Center as a Fulbright Scholar in 2019. After working in the archives of the Leo Baeck Institute, New York, she now is a research associate in the Research and Education Department at the Arolsen Archives. Welcome, Elizabeth and Katharina.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you, Katharina, for being here. And good afternoon to everybody. As Rachel said, my name is Elizabeth Berkowitz, and I'm just going to give you a bit of a brief overview of the next hour and just a little bit of context about this event for the Fritz Ascher Society. This is actually the third real-time data entry event in partnership between the Fritz Ascher Society and the Arolsen Archives Every Name Counts initiative. And for those of you who are sort of looking at the copy related to this event, this is the first time, though, in honor of this challenge, that we're using archival materials that are not in the Arolsen Archives right now. These are materials that, as Katharina will talk about, are currently at Yad Vashem. This is the Every Name Counts initiative, and this project is incredibly important because it's a project of active remembrance. So often when we think about victims of the Holocaust, we talk about how the stories of how the victims, the circumstances of their deaths or the stories of their persecution. This is really an opportunity to focus on their lives lived. In the process of doing this type of data entry, as you're recording, making findable, searchable, indexing the names of the family members and relatives who were searching for their loved ones, the places where the victims lived, maybe their professions, all of these details help us focus on the lives of the victims, and we honor them in the process of this record keeping or returning to public awareness. And in this way, the Every Name Counts initiative is a really good fit for the Fritz Ascher Society. The Society's work resurrecting the careers and public knowledge of artists and artworks by those artists who were persecuted under National Socialism is in many respects a similar act of honoring the lives of victims of the Holocaust. So it's a really wonderful collaboration between the two organizations. Before I sort of give a very brief overview of what's going to happen in the next hour, I want to also emphasize that this event should be perceived as a kickoff event. This is going to get you familiar with the data entry process, whether you participate in the challenge over the next 48 hours or after the next 48 hours, if you want to continue on your own with the Every Name Counts initiative on the Arolsen Archives using the Arolsen's collections, you are absolutely welcome to do so. And it's a wonderful thing to do, a wonderful project to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop my share. And on. I'm going to put in the chat the link to the tip sheet that you have all received prior to this event. This contains sort of tips about the project, about the data entry. You can reference it on your own in the process of doing the data entry. And what is going to happen next is I'm going to turn everything over to Katharina. She has some absolutely wonderful introductory videos and materials that'll introduce you to the Arolsen Archives themselves and to this particular project. She's also then going to walk us through some of the data entry with the materials we're going to be working with today. And amazingly, she is also going to be available for the duration of our data entry today. So if you have questions for Katharina, you can send them into the chat and she will answer them in real time as we go through the data entry process. We're then going to have about 25 minutes after Katharina's presentations to do data entry ourselves. And following that, I'll come back on so we can sort of think about how many cards we have entered and also have a little bit of time for reflection before we wrap up. And with that, I want to turn everything over to Katharina. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you both so much for this generous introduction and for the invitation and for your amazing preparation of this event today. I'll quickly share my screen too. Yeah, it is truly a great honor for me to be here with you today. I can speak for the entire team of the Arolsen Archives and thank you all truly so much for donating your time to our project Every Name Counts on the occasion of International Holocaust Remembrance Day this year. It really means a lot to us that you're here and that you take the time to help us index documents from our archives. As many of you might know already, the Arolsen Archives are one of the largest archives on the victims and survivors of Nazi persecution. The archives contain more than 30 million of documents, and most of these documents have been digitized and are available in our online archive. The Arolsen Archives history basically starts at the end of World War II when the Allied forces started to try to trace victims of Nazi persecution and collected all documents they could find, for example, in former concentration camps and other sites of persecution. And so today in Bad Arolsen in Germany, which is where the physical archive is located, there are these 30 million of documents. And in a bit, the deputy director of the archives will give you a short tour of the archive and also talk a bit more about these documents. Every Name Counts is a crowdsourcing initiative that was launched in 2020 in January. And the background of the project is that while the vast majority of the documents in the Arolsen Archives have been digitized, they still need to be what we call indexed in archival language in detail, which means that they need to be transcribed so we can make them fully searchable. So that if you go to the online archive, for example, you can type in words and this word will go back to the entire content of the documents, because simply having a document digitized does not automatically mean that it's fully searchable. In doing so, our goal is to create a digital memorial to the victims of Nazi persecution and the Holocaust, and to make sure that their names are remembered. As I said already, Every Name Counts started in 2020 as a school project, as an educational project, but it soon grew so that today we have almost 23,000 registered volunteers from all over the world who support the project. The volunteers have edited more than 5.1 million of documents, and they have exchanged more than 200,000 messages in the forum that is also part of the project. However, I want to say that you don't need to register to participate, so that also means that there is many more than the registered volunteers that have helped us so far to index the documents. The indexing is also important for the Arolsen Archives to help researchers and relatives today to reply to their requests, because up to today, we receive more than 20,000 requests a year. And so by helping us indexing the documents, you basically help us to provide this information to relatives, to researchers, and to the public. I will talk a bit more about the documents that we will index today and give you the details about how it works. But before that, I am happy to share a message from the director of the Arolsen Archives, Floriane Azoulay, who also wants to welcome you to the indexing challenge tonight and to thank you for your wonderful support. 1 second.
Dear volunteers, on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, you're taking a stand. You're helping us build the largest digital memorial on the victims of National Socialism. Every name, every date, every number you're typing in is making sure that the fates of these people are not forgotten. In the next 48 hours, we're going to index together 20,000 documents from the Central Location Index. The Central Location Index is an index from the United States of America and includes queries from people who were missing at the end of World War II. In participating in Every Name Counts, you're taking a stand in favor of diversity, respect, and democracy. Because, as we all know, the reasons for persecution are not history. Stay with me, and we will take you for a guided tour through our archives where more than 30 million documents, historical records, are kept. Thank you very much.
So now we hand over to Giora Zwilling, the deputy head of the Arolsen Archives.
Hello, my name is Giora Zwilling and I'm deputy head of the Arolsen Archive, and I will be taking you today to a short tour of our archives. The Arolsen Archives were founded as the International Tracing Service here in Bad Arolsen in central Germany. The reason we are located in this part of Germany is because after the war, this was smack in the middle of Germany and between the various occupation zones, the British, the Russian, American and French. The French is a bit farther away, but it's okay. The archive contains more than 30 million historical documents divided into several collection groups. In addition to the 30 million documents, we also have 50 million index cards in the Central Name Index, which is the main analog access to the archive pertaining to 17 million people. We are today replacing this finding aid by digital indexing of the documents, partially with the help of Every Name Counts volunteers. The first example we chose is from our concentration camp collections. We will go to the cabinets containing these. Here behind me you can also already see, this is our collection of individual documents from Buchenwald. Each cabinet contains hundreds of personal files on concentration camp prisoners or inmates. This is the prisoner card of Paul Goyard, a Frenchman. An artist, he took part in the resistance against German occupation in France, was arrested in Paris in 1944. He is listed as a French political prisoner. He managed to survive. There is a short article on him on our website. As I've said, there are hundreds of thousands of such files, and these do not include all the prisoners in all concentration camps, due to the fact that many of them were never registered and many of the files were destructed by the Nazis during the war. In addition to documentation from concentration camps, we also have a lot of documentation concerning forced labor. People from all around Europe were rounded to Germany to take part in the war effort. Most of these were from Eastern Europe, from Poland, from the Ukraine, from Belarus, from parts of the former Soviet Union. Here we have the file of Bashkirova Mila. She was born in nowadays Belarus and was very young. You can see she was born in 1925, and all the foreigners working on German territory were registered by the police. There were forced laborers and civilian laborers in each factory, city and farm in Germany. It's a huge number of people forced to work for the German war effort. And it's one of our most important collection groups, collection group 2. There are many kinds of documents here. It's quite complicated, and we hope to index them even deeper in the future. Most of these are available online already. As you can see, the so-called Wartime Index, which contains parts of these documents, is huge. I think it contains more than 2 million documents on individuals. The third group of documents we have are documents concerning displaced persons. All those people from all around Europe who found themselves on German territory by the end of the war. This includes a lot of survivors, Jewish and others, as well as people who, for many reasons, did not want to return to mainly the former Soviet Union. One especially interesting file from this group on DPs is the so-called CM1 file of Simon Wiesenthal. CM1 files are requests for assistance made by DPs, displaced persons residing in DP camps in Germany. In this case, it's the file, the application made by Simon Wiesenthal, who became quite famous as a Nazi hunter, a person collecting evidence and bringing perpetrators to justice. Simon Wiesenthal was born in Galicia, in nowadays Ukraine. He was arrested in Lviv, Lemberg, a city in western Ukraine. He was an architect and deemed as an intellectual, and thus arrested quite early. In the file, which is very detailed, you can see what happened to him during the war. He was arrested, he was deported to Auschwitz, he was then liberated in Mauthausen. The file is really very extensive, and in contrast to the Nazi documentation, contains a lot of information given by Wiesenthal himself. There is also a photo and many other identification documents from the post-war period. The collection is, by the way, available online and deeply indexed, and contains a lot of very interesting information. I hope that this short tour gave you an insight into the holdings of the Arolsen Archives. We would be very happy if you could take part in our campaign, Every Name Counts, and with that, take a stand for respect, democracy and diversity. Thank you.
Thank you for watching and your attention. And now I'll briefly go back to my presentation and give you a short overview about the documents that we will index today, because today we'll actually work on a collection that is not in the Arolsen Archives, but in the archives of our partner institution, Yad Vashem, or partner organization, Yad Vashem. One second, please. And so the files that we chose for the indexing challenge on the occasion of International Holocaust Remembrance Day this year are the documents from the Central Location Index. The Central Location Index was an umbrella organization that tried to coordinate the search for missing relatives and friends of people who were in the US or in other countries around the globe who were searching for people missed in Nazi Germany and due to World War II and the persecution. It was founded in 1944, and it was founded by 11 member organizations. Among them were HIAS, the Hebrew Sheltering and Immigrant Aid Society, also the National Council of Jewish Women, the International Rescue and Relief Committee, and the United Service for New Americans. The goal of the organization was to make joint efforts so that none of these organizations would search for the same people at the same time without knowing that others were doing the same work, and also to make their work more efficient. The organization was working with these index cards, one of which we see here on the left side, and they, for each person that was missing, created one of these index cards on which they included basic personal information about the missing people, such as their names, their date of birth, their profession, nationality, etc. And so these index cards were at the core, they were the main instruments to facilitate the research and to combine these efforts. Our goal tonight is to index 20, or not tonight, but within the next 2 days, is to index 20,000 of these cards. And it's going to be the first time that they will actually be digitally indexed. And all the information that we will enter today is going to then be played back into the archives of Yad Vashem, and will help us to make the information again available to researchers, relatives, and the public. On this slide, I also have a few quotes from a report that Etta Deutsch, the executive director of the CLI, wrote in a report in 1948. And she points out that while the name Central Location Index suggests a rather passive function, that the organization actually was really involved in very concrete and many and global efforts to search for missing people. She also points out, and I think that's a very important aspect when we think about the history of this organization, that the staff was very diverse, and that among the staff members were people who themselves had escaped Nazi Germany, who had survived concentration camps, and some of them even in the past had been names in this index. And I think that's important to remember that these people who were refugees themselves, immediately after having survived, joined this effort to find missing people. She also says that from these cards, the pages of history can be reconstructed, and I kind of want to take this with us when we now go on Suniverse, and keep in mind that each card stands for one person that was missing and was being searched for. The Central Location Index could find out the whereabouts of 50,000 people. 40,000 of these people were still alive. And at the same time, sadly, we also need to remember that they had received more than 750,000 requests. So when the organization stopped working and gave the tasks into other organizational structures in 1949, a vast majority of the requests they had received could not have been resolved. So in the years after the war, there were still a lot of people missing despite these very big and in many cases also successful efforts. I will now take you directly to the platform Suniverse, on which we will actually do the indexing. You will also find a link to the platform on the fact sheet that Elizabeth shared with you. But before we all start working on it, I would like to show you how the indexing works on 2 examples and explain a bit how you can participate. So the link will take you to this site. Suniverse is a non-commercial platform, and they are our partners in providing the infrastructure for the project. And here on the start page, we ask you to please choose what we call workflow, so this environment with the actual cards, and we are going to work on this central location index part 1 files today. And so we click on it, and then we see a little introduction, and we see the first index card. And here we have these fields. And so during Every Name Counts, we ask you to transcribe the information from the cards into this interface. And it will always start with the family name, which we can find here on the card. So I'll copy that, Weil, and the first name, Freddie. Here we have a field for the maiden name, often abbreviated with MN. On this card, there's no maiden name. And so every time you are asked for an information that is not on the card, we enter a hyphen. This is the same for every field. If there's the information that is asked for is not provided, please enter a hyphen. And then the next information is the index number, which we can find on the upper right side. Here we see that it's always, or we please ask you to always enter the information exactly as it is on the document. So here, for example, there's a hyphen in the index number. That's not always the case, but it's important that we really enter exactly what is here. Let's assume that I need some help with any task. You can always click on this field here below, and then you will see like common examples of how this information looks on the documents, and you will always get information on how to enter it. For example, what is pretty often with these documents is that there's not only a number, but also a letter in the index information. And here we ask you to please not enter a space, but just as is shown here, enter all the numbers and the letter in exactly as on the document, but without the space sign. Oh, and now here I see, I'm sorry, this is a new workflow. I just see that I made a mistake because I entered the hyphen, but actually it's asked that we do not enter the hyphen. So I'm glad I clicked on this and I can still correct my entry. So no hyphen, just letters and numbers. Once we're done with this one, with the first task, we click on next. And then some more information is being asked. We are asked the marital status, which is abbreviated with MS. The field is here, and as there is no information, here's a drop-down menu. We'll choose the hyphen again. Then we're asked to enter the date of birth. So now we have the situation, okay, there's a U, which stands for unknown, but let's see, we click on, we need help with this task. And it tells us that if there's no exact birth date, we enter hyphens. So sometimes it will happen that it says the age of someone, and in those cases, or it says unknown, we always just enter the hyphens because there's this information is not available in the drop-down menu. What sometimes happens is that the date of birth will be have been corrected later on. Like sometimes you will find it's crossed out and someone wrote a new date of birth, the correct date of birth by hand. And so in those cases, we ask you to always enter the information that you think was added last. So what you assume is the correct date of birth in the drop-down menu, and the correction, so the previous birth date, you would enter in this field corrections. Then we click on next, and we have we are asked information about the place of birth, which is always been found here. So in this case, Mr. Weil was born in Amsterdam. Citizenship, there's no information here, so we enter the hyphen. Religion, no information given, and occupation, it's the same. So we have 3 hyphens here, and then we're done indexing the first document. As we often get this question, I want to mention that in case, because sometimes people ask us, what happens if I accidentally enter the wrong information? That's okay, it happens. And each of these documents is being indexed 3 times by 3 different volunteers. So this is how we try to make sure that, if someone enters a wrong information, it's no problem because it's going to be corrected by someone else later. If you, for some reason, don't want to work on the document that you see, or you cannot read it, you can always press F5, and this will reload the page and show you the next document. I'll do maybe one more card without talking while I'm doing it, so you can just watch, and then I think I will continue indexing, so you can, if you want, watch a few more that I'm doing just to get more familiar with the process, or you can immediately start participating yourself. And if you have any questions during the process, please feel free to ask in the chat. I'll do one more card, then I'll check the chat maybe, and then I'll continue indexing.
Katharina, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So one of the questions that came in involves the other information that's on the cards that we're not entering, that we don't have fields for. Is this information that gets captured by the archives at another point, or is there a reason why this particular information is what we're being asked to enter?
This is what we could maybe consider like the most basic information, or at this point, the most important information to identify people. So the name, the date of birth, this information. And so we chose at this stage of the process to start with this most important information. And then probably at a later point, we will also ask volunteers to also index the rest of the card. Wonderful. But for now, we hope that with this most basic information, that this is also the information that people come with when they are searching for someone, and then will be pointed to the card and will be able to see the next information themselves because they could retrieve the document.
Amazing, thank you. Well, so thank you. And so everyone, we're going to get started, as Katharina said, with the data entry for the next, maybe we'll do 20, 25 minutes. As Katharina said, any questions, send it into the chat. She'll be able to answer them. As Katharina also mentioned, I know it does feel perhaps sometimes a little overwhelming, particularly if you're not used to working with primary sources on a regular basis. So be patient with yourself. The first card always takes a little bit of time to just get used to it. Please, consult the tip sheet, talk to Katharina. It's a process, and this is, as we said, this is the kickoff. This is the starting point for work that you can do outside of this particular event. This just gets you familiar with it. So don't focus on the number of cards you can do. It's more on sort of getting the muscle memory to be able to do it. And then what I'll do is I'll give everyone sort of a 1-minute warning when we're going to kind of start to wrap up the card that we're working on, and then we will sort of conclude. So good luck, everybody.
And thank you. I'll now reply to questions in the chat. Thank you, Elizabeth, also for replying in the chat. It's very helpful.
Of course, many, many hands make light work.
Yes, Rachel just asked me also to reply to the questions in the video. There was a question about the date of birth, and as it was an American institution, the format is the American format. So it's first the month, then the day, and then the year. Someone is asking whether the information will only be available for 48 hours. No, definitely not. The workflows are gonna stay up. And you can also, as you saw on the starting page, if in the future you would want to work on different documents, you can always also choose different documents to work on, but it's like a continuous platform that is always available. Oh, someone is asking about how to enter. I know, I'm sorry that we did that so fast. I'll go back to the starting page now and show you one more time a bit slower. So this is the page that you get when you open the link. And then if you scroll down a bit here, in this Get Started section, you will see it here on the right side. It's the one that is called Basic Central Location Index Part 1. Exactly. And also, if you want to take some more time to get familiar with it, you can always read this tutorial here. You'll find some more information. And I think that's also a good start to start working on the project is to read through the tutorial, which also gives you an introduction and hopefully gives answers to questions. Someone says that they don't have the basic part 1 link. One assumption could be that you've maybe been on the page before, because we only added this workflow a couple of minutes ago, 6 p.m. here in Europe, noon Eastern time. So maybe if you restart your browser or reload the page, I hope that it's going to show up. Thank you. The birthdays are in the US format, so it's month, day, year. Oh, great. Now it worked, Monica. Thank you for trying again and for participating. If for now there's no more questions, I'll maybe continue and index a card, but I'll make sure to look into the chat again.
Katharina, we had a question that came into the Q&A. It says, do we need to replicate capital and lowercase letters as seen on the card? For example, one last name is all caps.
No, that's you can always start with the cap, or if you prefer, you could also write all lowercase. It's not case sensitive.
Thank you.
Katharina, there's also a question. Felicia asked whether the archives from the US Holocaust Museum include the ones from your archives.
Not their online archives, but the USHMM has access to the database of the Arolsen Archives. So researchers who are on site at the USHMM, they have access to the big research database of the Arolsen Archives. And as I said, you can also access most of the Arolsen Archives document in the online archives of the Arolsen Archives. I think Elizabeth also included a link to that in the fact sheet. But of course, the USHMM archives hold information about many people that also are mentioned in the archives of the Arolsen Archives. So the two collections sort of support each other in a way. Someone is asking, what do you do with dates of birth that are listed 42 years old? In that case, we ask you to please enter all hyphens in the drop-down menu, as we don't know exactly when the information was added, so we cannot just do the math and calculate that for ourselves. So yeah, this information is not entered. We just do all hyphens. Someone is asking, I have a month of birth as 5. Should I enter the 5? In that case, unfortunately, the information is so unspecific. I, for example, would now assume maybe they meant that someone was 5 years old, but as we don't know, we ask you to please enter the hyphens. Exactly. Or if just, of course, if there's just a year, you can enter hyphen for the month and the date, and you just enter the year. But exactly as Elizabeth said, for any numbers that are missing, you just enter the hyphen, please. Someone is asking about the religion field. Here we ask you to please always exactly copy what is written on the document. So even if, for example, if it says J period and we know that it stands for Jewish, we still ask you to please enter it exactly as it is written on the document. So J period would then be the correct or the requested way for the project to enter it. And the reason for that is that based on like archival principles, we really want to avoid to make any sort of interpretations, and that's why we really want to collect exactly the data as it is written on the document.
I just wanted to ask the two questions that had just come in. One being, can we share this on social media, this project, the Every Name Counts initiative? And Katharina, I think maybe perhaps I can answer for you when I say, yes, please share this. This is great. Even outside of the 48 hours, the Every Name Counts project is something that is ongoing. So the more you share, the more data entry can be done. And there are different collection materials. It's the Arolsen, outside of this 48 hours period where we're working with the Yad Vashem collections, the Arolsen Archive collections are there to be indexed as part of the Every Name Counts initiative. So please share the link to the platform, to the Arolsen Archives page. Yes, please share. And I think the other question that came in was, will this webinar be repeated? This is being recorded, so we will have this available through the Fritz Ascher Society site, but also the process, so you can reference it. But also, again, if you go to the Arolsen Archives page, to the Every Name Counts page, you can continue to do this data entry either within the 48 hours with this collection, or pick some of the other collections within the Arolsen Archives digitized holdings, so that you can continue to do this.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Of course.
Yes, and it really helps us a lot if you share information about Every Name Counts, or if you encourage others to participate. That's also an important contribution to the project, because of course we rely on volunteers to help us. And as Elizabeth said, it's not over after Friday. Documents are available, and we are always very happy and grateful for support.
Katharina, one more question that came in about process. Donna is saying, the card I'm doing right now has 2 index numbers. One is stamped in red, one is handwritten. Do I enter them separated by a semicolon?
Yes, if they are both in this index number field, yes, please. If the handwritten one is, as is shown here, more on the left side, we ask you to please choose the one that is here in this field, index number. But in case there is like 2 on top of each other, or if they are both in this index field, then exactly as you suggested.
Thank you.
Okay, yes.
So everyone, we're going to take about 1 more minute to do this data entry. I'm sure, don't worry if you've only gotten a chance to do one, or you're still working through one. As we've been saying, this is the kickoff. This is the starting point for this as a long-term project, and a long-term project to engage with. So not to worry, but we're going to give just another minute to do the data entry project in this hour.
As Katharina, you said that there's a possibility to register as a volunteer, and so the difference between being registered and not being registered is that as you register, you enter a community of volunteers who is talking to each other, has discussions, and is, from what I heard, and Katharina, you know much more about that, but is a very active community.
Yes, and in addition to that, you can also ask questions to the community, but also to my colleagues in the archival department. So if there's information that you want to inquire about, or if you have any questions about the documents at any time, you will then get a response from a staff member of the Arolsen Archives. And at the same time, we're also always happy to hear from our volunteers. So also comments about the project are very welcome. And so, of course, we're very happy if you register, and at the same time, it's not necessary to participate.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody. So I think we're going to stop for the moment just to start the wrap up process. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to finish the card that you're working on at the moment. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send in the chat. I think we should all just sort of check in and see how many cards we've been able to do, even in this short period of time, even as we're learning how to use this interface and these documents. So if you follow the link that's in the chat, it'll take you to a survey where you can enter the number of cards, and let's take a look and see how many we've been able to do in even a short amount of time. Give everyone a few seconds to do this. And I think there have been some, I think the concern about accuracy has been raised. And I want to reiterate what Katharina said. Again, it feels like a lot of pressure. These are human beings, these are lives, and we want to record these details so they can be found, which is why there is this really wonderful check on the system. Every single card, as Katharina mentioned, is done by 3 different volunteers. And if there is a question, it does go to the archival staff if there's too much of a discrepancy. So there is oversight. So to take a little bit of the pressure off, not to worry. But
and also feel free to press F5 and work on a different card. There's also no need, to force yourself to work on the one document that you get.
So I just wanted to congratulate everybody, because so far, even in this short period of time, even with the challenges of figuring out how to work with these materials, we've done 27 cards. Those are 27 lives that have been entered into the public record as a result of our work today. So everyone should feel really good about this contribution to this project of memory. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And also, of course, we set this challenge with this number of 20,000 documents, and there is this element of quantification, but of course, it's not about that. It's exactly about the opposite. It's not about numbers, it's about the names. And, it can be emotionally challenging to work on those cards. So of course, take breaks, or, it's about the names. It's not about the number.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what I'm going to do right now, because this is in many respects, this is an emotional process of sort of going through materials like this, especially if you don't work with them on a regular basis. And even if you do, they're still emotional. I'm sure, Katharina, you can attest, you're working with these materials every day, but each card is still powerful. Again, these are lives that were, either of individuals who were killed or who were persecuted, or you think of the pain of loved ones who were searching for their missing relatives. So these are inherently emotional archival materials. So what I wanted to just do is let's sort of take the temperature of the room very briefly and just sort of think about a word that comes to mind to sort of describe the experience of working with these cards or this process. there's two different ways you can respond. You can see on your screen, you can either text the letter, the alphanumeric code there to that number, or you can go to polleverywhere.com and then enter that alphanumeric. And let's just take a minute and just, whatever comes into your mind. What do you think about when you reflect on the data that you were looking at, or even this process? And it would be good to sort of see where we all kind of landed. I'll leave this up here for another second. Also, just enter the text code into the chat. Give everyone another minute to respond. I think one word that has been coming up is sort of that sense of responsibility. And I think as we think about International Holocaust Remembrance Day approaching, we also think about the responsibility of remembering. And so I appreciate that those were some of the words that people were reflecting on. So this is our word cloud that's sort of live updating as people respond. Productive, humbling, somber, sad, hopeful. So these are all, it's just a quick moment to sort of just think about this process and to reflect.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing these impressions, and really again for being here and for donating your time. And I can really speak for the entire team of the Arolsen Archives in really thanking you for that.
Well, thank you, Katharina, for being here. So I think we're going to wrap up a little bit. Before we close, Katharina, is there anything else you would like to say to everyone before we turn things over to Rachel to close out this event?
Well, I really want to thank all of you. We also thank our partner, Yad Vashem, for working together on this occasion. And as we said before, the project is online. We also want to encourage you to look at the website of the Arolsen Archives to look what else you find there. But yeah, I think most of all, it's really just about thanking you for the time and for supporting this digital memorial.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Katharina. This was a very moving and very meaningful event, and you really showed us the importance of this project and how easy ultimately it is to become part of it. And I liked Elizabeth's expression of active remembrance with all these memorial events coming up tomorrow and this whole week already. It always feels so helpless, to realize dimensions and the horror that happened. And this project gives us an active way of doing something, of helping memorize people, and every single one of them. So now we have 47 hours. We spent 1 hour already. 47 hours are left to actively help build the largest digital memorial to the victims of National Socialism. So the challenge is on, but as Katharina said, it keeps going afterwards. There are always different sets of cards, different sets of documents being released for us to get active and help indexing the documents. So thank you so much, everyone. Be well and goodbye.